Again, it's better for me if he doesn't. For all, everyone else. Let's see.
How much I love UFC?
Yeah.
I did not pay the money that they sent to the fighters. The fucking, how they call the lawsuit, yeah.
Pause
yeah.
it.
Wait,
that's
hold on. So
This is how stupid fighters are. They think, and they're underpaid. And that's a whole nother story. And people are like, I don't understand why more fighters don't ask for better pay. This is why. This dude is brainwashed that thinks he's being a company man by not taking the lawsuit money. They're the toughest people in the world outside special forces, military. But I'm saying for professional athletes, there's nobody walking this earth more mentally strong and tougher and more of a risk taker than a professional UFC fighter. Hands down, out of all the professional sports, there's nobody like a MMA athlete. There's a reason at the ESPYs that John Jones, Cleo Roundtree, whoever the fuck it is, can walk in a room filled with the most famous athletes on the planet, and all of them will bend the fucking knee.
So Brendan Schaub is back on everyone's feed because he manages to always make a fool of himself, and it's really amazing at this point. Even when he's on the right side of an argument, he still sounds stupid anyway, and people are just so sick of him, so it doesn't even matter what he says. This time is because of Renato Moicano's statements regarding the payout from the UFC antitrust lawsuit, statements that are so dumb that Papa almost sounds smart. So this is what it's all about. In December of 2014, a class action lawsuit was filed against the UFC by a group of fighters, with Kong Lee, John Fitch, and Brendan Vera leading the way. They claimed the UFC acted as a monopoly to suppress fighter compensation, specifically using exclusive contracts and other restrictive practices. The lawsuit was settled in 2025, with the UFC agreeing to pay $375 million to be dispersed amongst fighters who competed between 2010 and 2017, according to how many fights they had and how much they were paid for those fights during that time. And so the new Brendan Schaub meltdown begins after Renato Moicano shared that he wouldn't be accepting his payout from the settlement during an episode of his ironically named Show Me the Money podcast. This is probably the most difficult video I ever had to make, as both parties sound like morons here. English is not Moicano's first language, so he gets a bit of a pass. He's only thinking like an idiot. Our boy Papa, on the other hand, is actually thinking clearer, but still ends up sounding like the bigger dumbass. So I'm not even going to script this video, as translating all of this nonsense is a real task. Let's just play some clips and I'll comment and add more information and context as we go along.
You know how much I love UFC? I did not pay the money that they sent to the fighters. The lawsuit, yeah. Yeah.
Wait,
that's
hold on. So they sent you from the settlement. They sent you money and you didn't accept it.
Yeah, I just had to put my name over there.
As we move along, you'll learn that Moicano then explains his decision was about being true to his beliefs and principles. But this is actually how he first presented it. He loves the UFC so much, he didn't even take his lawsuit money. What's even more interesting, if you rewind the podcast a mere 2 minutes, Moicano can be found explaining that he just signed a new deal with the UFC that will prevent him from getting more money in the long run.
How much is Money Moicano gonna get per fight then?
Take a guess, my brother. I just signed a new contract.
You signed it?
Don't you know?
No.
I did not tell you?
No. How many fight deal?
5.
5 fights?
Too much. No, that's bad. Yeah.
Why is that bad?
Because like if you have like 3 or 4 fights, you can get more money.
So he understands, on some level at least, that the UFC wants to pay them the least amount as possible, but okay. You can be aware of this and still be satisfied with your compensation, and being that Moicano studies economics a lot, I'm sure that he has a really clear answer as to why his morals are in conflict with accepting the settlement money.
They went through saying that UFC did not pay the fighters fair enough, but this is like, let's say, you get a girl today and you fuck her, and like 2 years later he say, hey, the guy raped me. You know?
Okay, I don't even know what to say or do with this. Just bottom of the barrel stupid shit, so let's move on. As you'll see down the line, after Brendan Schaub's meltdown, Moicano becomes defensive as he feels people have no right to attack his morals and principles. But he was actually the one who did it first.
All the fighters that got money, they are fucking no morals.
No morals.
Right?
He didn't expand on it much, but at least publicly, he was the one who took the first shot. Apparently, his friends who did take the money had already called him stupid, but that's because they are his friends and are trying to reason with him.
And I even was talking to Pantoja, to Pahumpa, to other fighters that took it, and they would say, hey, you are dumb. No, it's because I understand that, and that's how it works, you know, because this is why America is so fucked up.
We also don't get much else from this idea that getting money from a class action lawsuit because your company is a monopoly who pays way less than you deserve, that's what's wrong with America. But we'll return to this. It doesn't even matter because Renato Moicano goes on to say this.
Yeah, that's pretty
Man, if that shit was like 10 million, I would take it. I'm not fucking cent, you know? But I'm not gonna...
For sure.
Because money is money, you know?
So all this talk about principles and beliefs, it's all just bullshit, I guess, depending on how much money it is. And people on the comments are applauding this guy, which is so bizarre to me. There's a subsection of UFC fans who are just some of the dumbest people in the world. Moicano is a 36-year-old lightweight fighter on a 2-fight losing streak. It wouldn't be shocking for him to be out of the UFC by this time next year. We're talking about a guy who took $8,000 to show and another $8,000 to win on his first contract. He got injured after that and couldn't fight again for another year and a half. Likely didn't even receive any money to help with any of his medical bills. Meanwhile, WNBA players are getting $66,000 on the lowest tier of contracts. You know, the sport no one cares about that only gets any coverage because dildos keep getting thrown into the court. So that's what I mean. All of this free market bullshit, I actually agree with it in principle, but all the ideas he's referencing were given birth to in the 1970s when people were still buying cars made in America, never mind accounting for corporations whose entire goal is to suck every single drop of life out of you for profit. And Milton Friedman and the Chicago School of Economics guys deal mostly with macroeconomic scenarios anyway. You know, currency supplies, managing inflation, so it doesn't even apply to UFC contract negotiations in the slightest. And he's going to go back to these ideas later, so let's get out of this for now and show one last clip from this podcast.
If you like what USA was created, like free market, you have to, it's the same thing that I was saying about Ben Askren, you know, you have to do your part of the deal, you know, you have to, you cannot take advantage of people. But the problem is the mindset of people now is UFC is fucking rich, they can do that, you know. It's not like that, bro. You have to honor your part, you know, on the country.
Yeah, I respect that.
You know?
That's pretty dope.
I appreciate the idea that free markets should be fueled by people's integrity when entering into a commercial agreement between them, but how could you say this and reference Ben Askren in the same sentence? You know, a guy who kept paying the premium on his life insurance and was left to die when he needed double lung transplant. And realistically, what big company can you point to nowadays that doesn't act exactly like this? We'll get back to how tangled and twisted Moicano's ideas about what free market means, but we're done with this podcast. I'm not going to show any of Brendan Schaub's response, it's just a lot of yelling and telling Moicano that he is stupid. By the way, Moicano's initial comments were 5 minutes long. Brendan Schaub turned this into a 40 minutes rant. After this, Moicano went on the Ariel Helwani show to further explain his position, and we'll take a look at that now.
Do you think UFC, when they first sign with UFC, they are happy or they are sad? I'm asking to you. So when UFC goes to a fighter, they say, hey, this is your contract, you're gonna make 10 plus 10. I don't know any fighter that went to the UFC thinking that was a bad business, at the beginning of their career. Everybody's happy.
Being happy is one thing, being compensated accordingly is another. When you're getting $8,000 to show and $8,000 to win, you still have to take into account taxes, splitting some of the money with your manager and trainers, living expenses, and again, accordingly is the key word here. $16,000 providing that you win your fight sounds like a lot of money if you're working McDonald's. But at McDonald's, people aren't likely to break their legs or their ankles. And if they do, McDonald's sure doesn't provide the best health insurance coverage to their employees, but they do provide something. So of course fighters are happy when they sign with the UFC. It's a major career accomplishment, even if, for a vast number of them, the UFC is just a detour to getting a real job down the line, being a gym owner, a trainer, etc. And a lot of them don't even get that. But of course they're happy. I hated every job I ever worked, and I was still happy when I got them, because I needed the fucking money.
The whole lawsuit stuff was based on UFC is a monopoly. I think they should treat the athletes better. I think they should pay more money. And at one point they say, no, let's settle this down. And they do agreement with the fighters in UFC, and they say, no, we're gonna give you 300 and I don't know how much millions. And they dropped the lawsuit. So that was not about UFC being a monopoly. The lawyers, they took more than 20%. That means they took more money than most of the fighters, if not all the fighters. So 20% of 300 million is a lot of money.
Almost everything I know about class action lawsuits comes from Better Call Saul.
Here we go. Public masturbation.
So yeah, I'm not an expert. But this I know. The lawsuit represented upwards of 1,000 fighters. So while Kong Lee, Brendan Vera, John Fitch, and Nate Quarry might not be bazillionaires, they were able to build a comfortable living for themselves. But now that it's a class action lawsuit, the lawyers are representing people like Nam Pham. Remember Nam Pham? He had 8 fights in the UFC from 2010 and 2017. He was let go and had to keep on fighting to make money. And this is him now.
Hey, how you doing? It's about a few days. It's Tuesday. It's about a few days after my fight. I promoted that fight. I tried to get Dacker out of the fight. He's a pretty cool guy.
So there are fighters being represented on this lawsuit who are desperate for money. And they've been out of the UFC for years now. And quite honestly, seeing how close the UFC is with the current administration, with all the parades, all the fighters kissing Trump's ass, them actually having an active hand on giving out visas to foreign fighters who otherwise might not be able to fight in America, and even being given a green card to tear down the Alley Act, something that stood for decades and allowed boxers to be some of the best compensated athletes in the world. Yeah, maybe settling back then might have been a good idea. As far as the lawyers being paid 20%, which is more than most UFC fighters, this lawsuit has been going on for 10 years, and it took a handful of law firms with God knows how many employees working on this. So again, Moicano might not be quite the mathematician he thinks he is.
At least I don't think I need a judge. I don't think I need a justice system to say what is right and what is wrong. The judge decide that the money is for the fighters, but that's not true. That was agreement. So the fighters in the UFC, they want an agreement. So the judge didn't decide anything. And even if they did, that's not means that is moral, because legality and morality, that is nothing to do with each other, because we know back in the day in America, you used to have slaves. The same thing with prohibition. Back in the day, you cannot drink alcohol because the law says it's illegal. It's the same thing with marijuana. It's the same thing with a lot of stuff. So just because a judge or the justice system decide that is right and that is wrong, that doesn't mean that is right and that's wrong. I live by a law. I live by a code. I live by the natural law, and I believe every individual should be free and should be protecting his life, his liberty, and his freedom. And government should not be deciding this kind of thing. I believe in free market. I believe people should make their own decision. And
let's talk about morality and people being able to make their own decisions. Stephen Barner, half of the fight Dana White says helped save the company, something that is backed by the actual numbers, had to go into amateur wrestling after retiring from MMA. He was addicted to painkillers that he desperately needed to keep punishing his body. He died young and in poverty. Is that moral? What about when the UFC was paying Nate Diaz $15,000 to win and $15,000 to show, and Dana was out there saying he didn't move the needle instead of actually promoting? What about those morals? Let's talk about free markets and people being able to make their own decisions. Decisions like having their own sponsors, decisions like planning their walkouts. Dustin Poirier, one of the most decorated UFC fighters ever, couldn't even get the okay for Lil Wayne to perform as he walked out for his retirement fight. Dustin got a disclosed $1.5 million purse for that fight. Meanwhile, the same night, Daniel Dubois was getting $70 million and walking out like this.
But I don't believe UFC is a monopoly. Why UFC is not a monopoly? Because there is no legal barriers for other shows. We have PFL, we have Bellator, and what happened? Why UFC is not a monopoly? Because there is no laws that don't let another competition comes in, you know?
Yeah, what happened to Bellator? Remember these leaked messages from Dana White to Lorenzo Fertitta about taking oxygen from those fuckers? Who do you think they're talking about? And yeah, there's a legal barrier to entry for other promoters. It's your fucking UFC contract, dumbass.
Eventually, if the market is free, eventually the competition will arise, and UFC is abusing the power as a company. The employees and the people will stop to watch, you know. If you're not satisfied with the fighters' pay, don't watch UFC. If you don't agree with the terms of the contract, don't fucking sign the contract, you know. You're free to choose. You are free to choose, but most of the people, they don't want to read about that. They don't want to hear about that, you know. They want to say, now, government has to do everything for you, and he has to decide, and UFC is a monopoly, and we need to take him down. If you don't like, don't watch. If you don't feel they have the standards that you like, don't sign the contract. It's easy as that.
Yeah, but the market's not free. And why would people on the production side of the UFC quit their jobs because fighters are scared to demand a fair share? And why would people stop watching? We're not the ones getting screwed. It's just the stupidest shit ever. Can you imagine in any other scenario, people getting ripped off by their employers and talking like this? If you think teachers are underpaid, don't send your kids to school. That totally makes sense. NBA, NHL, and NFL players get around 50% of the revenue generated from their leagues. The UFC fighters get less than 20% and are out here telling us not to watch if we think that's kind of unfair. Really genius stuff.
We're fighting, and this is like government. Was like Lyndon Johnson expand the welfare program in the United States. You know, we're going to do that for the single moms that cannot work. Okay, but then 15 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, we see the debit in America because people doesn't care about what they say. They don't care about the words.
I definitely agree that there's a lot of abuse of the welfare system, but much more common and much more nefarious is the amount of people who have jobs and still are just a hair away from homelessness and total poverty. Maybe that has something to do with people claiming welfare. If they get paid the same for not working, while companies and CEOs claim record profits every year, what incentive is there for society at large? Maybe that's more of a relevant thing than Lyndon fucking Johnson.
In the end of the day, if UFC has all the fighters and if they have the biggest market share, that's good for the fans because they can see the fights that they want, you know? The difference between boxing, all the people say that, in the boxing, the best don't fight the best. I'm not saying that that's good for the fighters, because of course they can pay you less money and they can control more the fights, but for the fans is good. And that's why even when the fighters are on the PFL, they are in Rising, they are in ONE FC, everybody wants to go to the UFC.
Yeah. 2025 was the year where we saw all the fights we wanted, and the UFC didn't totally jack up the ticket prices because what the fuck are consumers going to do? It's really great for fans.
And if you think yourself as dumb, think the people that watch the Brendan Schaub show on YouTube, the comedian, the special, that's fucking terrible. Okay, brother? Even I can do better than that shit, brother. And I don't even speak English, and I can be funnier than you, my brother.
Gosh, Papa catches stray.
I just wanted to go out on this clip because Brendan Schaub made a whole thing pretending not to understand Moicano's broken English. He clearly meant, if you ever think you're stupid, remember that there's people non-ironically enjoying Brendan Schaub, and he's absolutely right. Anyway, this video is way too long, so thank you very much for watching as always, and I'll see you on the next one.
If you think yourself as dumb, I never said I was dumb. I might call myself an idiot, but compared to him, I'm Elon Musk.
Well, he's not talking to you about that.
Think about my fans, which is, if you're listening to me, that means I'm dumb and he's dumb and the fans are dumb, right? And then he goes, Brendan Schaub's show on YouTube. Oh, it's a podcast, mainly audio. We do YouTube just for the fuck of it.
So he
and
said,
the comedy
read
special.
the whole quote,
Hold on. And the comedy special. Oh, you're talking about from 5 years ago?
Yeah.
This is, so it's just like,